Our NSA got hacked. It's a bad story from the New York Times. We got one of the authors coming up next on the Armstrong and Getty Show.
Mate, don't do it.
From the New York Times, in an article about the NSA, the agency regarded as the world's leader in breaking into adversaries' computer networks failed to protect its own.
Shocking stuff indeed.
Yeah, the headline, NSA struggles to recover after huge breach of spying tools. Pretty troubling to read.
I would say, and one of the authors of the piece, Scott Shane, who's a reporter in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times, joins us now. Scott, welcome. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Well, lay out the story for us, and I got some questions for you.
So basically this is something that started in August of 2016, so 15 months ago, but hasn't really gotten the broad public attention that it deserves, partly because it's sort of technical and partly because the government, I think, has not wanted to say much about it or to have it draw much attention. But basically it's a catastrophe for the National Security Agency, which traditionally is associated with code breaking and eavesdropping, but in more recent years, for obvious reasons, has gotten into hacking into foreign computer networks to gather intelligence in that way. And what happened in August 2016 is that a still unidentified mysterious group calling itself the Shadow Brokers popped up on the Internet and said, we have a whole lot of NSA's hacking tools. This is the malware and so on that NSA hackers use to hack into foreign systems. We've acquired these tools and we're going to auction them off. The auction didn't really go anywhere, but they began to actually put out these hacking tools online, and this is kind of played out over more than a year now. And the hacking tools were picked up by criminal and possibly government hackers in several instances. And people might remember back in May, there was a big kind of epidemic of what they call ransomware, which is when your computer suddenly stops working and there's a message on your screen that says you have to pay ransom, you have to make a payment, or we will destroy all your files and you'll never be able to use your computer again. And that ransomware attack and a whole lot more attacks since late last year have been carried out by assorted hackers using these NSA tools. And they've attacked American companies, hospitals in multiple countries. FedEx spent $300 million fixing services that it was providing in Europe after they were attacked. And all these attacks occurred with these National Security Agency hacking tools, which you, the American taxpayer, paid a lot of money to create. So, I mean, when you kind of get your head around it, basically American taxpayers paid millions and millions of dollars for NSA to develop these hacking tools, which are now out in the wild being used by hackers to attack the U.S.
That's pretty annoying.
Other countries.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, listen, Scott, to observe the obvious, the fact that our allegedly greatest, smartest, most advanced hackers would in turn be hacked is just incredibly disappointing. Did you get the idea it's because they're up against forces so clever and insidious there was no stopping them? Or does it smell more like, failure? Or
well, I mean, it's certainly a failure. How justified it might be, I think, is an open question. And one of the interesting things here is that the National Security Agency was created in 1952, and it went for decades with there's a couple of exceptions, but basically being almost entirely leak-proof. The old joke is that NSA stands for no such agency or never say anything. And, those rules, pretty much held for a long, long time. That changed with Edward Snowden, who flew off to Hong Kong in 2013 with hundreds of thousands of secret NSA documents, which he gave to journalists. And since then, there have been the arrests that we know of 3 people who were working inside NSA, either as an employee or a contractor, for taking stuff out of the agency without permission. In one case, a guy named Hal Martin, who had done it for years, it turned out, just wasn't caught, and he'd stuffed documents and hard drives and things into his home office, his car, and even the shed in his garden. And and then on top of all that, you have this shadow brokers attack, which we still don't understand whether it's a foreign power, probably Russia, breaking into NSA.
Could be a fat guy, 400-pound guy sitting on his bed, remember.
It could be. It could be that old 400-pound guy. I mean, some of the theories are that it was an insider who took the stuff out and gave it to the Russians. So some combination of the two.
Well, wow.
But we don't know. That's the problem.
Is it just impossible to get better at screening possible employees so we don't have that sort of thing happen, whether it's Edward Snowden or that possibility?
Well, I think the problem is one of scale. NSA has, I don't know what the exact number is, but somewhere around 40,000 employees. And, many have been hired in relatively recent years to do exactly this kind of work. They're young people who are tech savvy who are being hired. And, we live
thousands, as you point out.
Yeah, thousands and thousands. So at the big NSA headquarters at Fort Meade in Maryland, and at other, they have a bunch of big facilities scattered around the country. So thousands of people go in and out every day, and they have struggled with, do you do an airline-style security check? And that's almost impossible with thousands of people. So as listeners know, you can put a library worth of data on a thumb drive these days, put it in your pocket, and walk out. And there are lots of procedures they've put in place to try to prevent that. But most of the people that we talk to who work there say you cannot seal up an agency like that.
It's interesting. Scott Shane's a reporter in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times reporting on this enormous breach of the NSA. But you picture, the classic flat top haircut, suit-wearing, loyal American NSA agent of the past. Mm-hmm. And their kind of their moral structure and the way they see the world, as opposed to a bunch of 20-something computer hackers. It's difficult, just because we know certain kinds of people are drawn to certain kinds of work. It's just difficult to have thousands and thousands of that sort of guy in charge of national security.
And a lot of them are anti-institutions of all kinds.
Well, right, yeah. There are a lot of...
I mean, I think you actually put your finger on something really significant about the history of this agency. When they were created in 1952, obviously they were picking up a lot of people who'd done this kind of code-breaking, eavesdropping work during World War II. And so that was, guys coming out of the military and so on. Now, in recent years, NSA has done a lot of recruiting at hacker conferences, and sometimes you have these admirals and generals who, actually are at the very top of NSA, dressing in jeans and T-shirts and going to hackers conferences and saying, "Hey, come work for Uncle Sam." And it's been pretty effective because they have a lot to offer in terms of obviously an important mission, but also being able to carry out hacking without the worry that the FBI is going to knock on your door. So there's a lot of appeal there, but as everybody knows, people in their 20s, their early 30s, there's a lot of libertarian thinking. There's a lot of feeling sort of that my decision is my view of things is maybe just as important as the institution's view of things, and maybe more important. And it's not going to be a large number of people, but out of 40,000 people, you don't need a large number to create a lot of leaks.
How good are we at this stuff? This is something I've been struggling with for years, trying to figure this out, because we're far and away the best at nuclear bombs and super cool planes and aircraft carriers and all this different stuff. But are we just kind of one of many when it comes to the cyber stuff?
Well, I guess, from what I know, I think NSA is very, very good at this. The CIA does some of this too, and CIA has actually been hit by a major leak of hacking tools as well, maybe not coincidentally. But I think they're considered to be extremely good, probably the best in the world. They have managed to put what they call software implants, malware implants, in targeted computer networks around the world, which not only gather intelligence but could be used to shut down computer networks if there was a conflict, for example. So they're said to be very, very good. The only kind of caveat is that this is a game anyone can play. I mean, the 400-pound guy sitting on his bed, that's not totally wrong. You can be a very, very good hacker sitting in your parents' basement and really be pretty good at this. So just as the Internet has sort of leveled the playing field so that you have the President of the United States saying something and then, say, Osama bin Laden saying something when he was around and reaching a global audience, in this case, North Korea is very good at hacking. North Korea barely has an economy, but they're very good at hacking. So, this is sort of an equalizing technology, even though the U.S., I think, is probably better at it than other countries.
Scott Shane writes for the New York Times. He's based out of Washington, D.C. Scott, really enjoyed the chat. Interesting stuff. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure.
Current and former agents of the NSA telling the New York Times that morale is very low.
The NSA is denying that, Jack. Morale's better than ever here at the NSA.
Yeah, that's tough. That's the history of warfare, and I'm hating to see it happen with the United States because we've been the world's leader for so long now. But the history of warfare, something new comes along. The Brits ruled the seas on the planet for hundreds of years with big giant ships with cannons, and then somebody on the east coast of the United States came up with the idea of putting steel sheets on the side of boats, and that was the end of the Brits' run. It was over. As soon as somebody came up with that idea, and ironclads were going to rule the seas from then on. It's just that's the way it happens. You can rule with a long bow until somebody develops a longer long bow or a shield that will stop that arrow from going through. Then all of a sudden you're not the dominant force anymore. And if the new wave is going to be this cyber stuff, we just might be, there might be a lot of parity.
Yeah, well, it's such a paradigm shift, and I hate to use that term, but this is actually one where you could have one or certainly 3, 4, 5 really, really talented 23-years. And suddenly North Korea is toe-to-toe with the U.S.
Yeah.
Or France or Zimbabwe.
Which was unthinkable. Well, still is unthinkable when it comes to aircraft carriers or anything else.
Oh, sure, right. But yeah, it's a paradigm shift. It's amazing. Now, granted, if we all take out our each other's computer networks, and all of our electric grids and the rest of it, and the world is black, well, then it'll be back to guns and bombs.
Good to have those, yeah.
We'll probably figure out a way to use them even without the communications that we're used to. But, yeah, it's a hell of a deal.
There is that whole thing with my sense is, I don't actually know this, but my sense from TV and interviews and all that different sort of stuff is a lot of your hacker types, they don't have loyalty to really anything.
Right. Well, I like the contrast to the crew-cutted guys who dedicated their youth to defeating the Nazis versus some hacker dude who's dedicated his youth to getting the new Star Wars movie pirate version before it comes out. I mean, he's not about the red, white, and blue.
Yeah, and he could get as much of a thrill of hacking into the NSA as working for the NSA and hacking into somebody else. He just likes hacking.
Well, especially if you have the hubris of the youth. I mean, this is bull-ass, dude. This NSA gig sucks. You know what we ought to do?
Well, and
you can easily picture that.
Well, just try to remember being, 19. How much enjoyment would you get as a 19-year-old to be able to hack into the grown-ups, best defenses at the NSA and show them how stupid they are?
And tell all your friends.
Yeah, how much enjoyment would you get out of that?
And hopefully pull some chicks. If that would get me chicks, I'd spend all night.
Yeah, you got hot and cold running dark net porn. Nobody, you've never even seen this stuff. Stuff they have in the dark net.
I don't want to see it. The regular stuff is fine.
What's coming up in your news, Marshall Phillips?
Well, a top Republican leader drops support now for embattled Senate candidate Roy Moore.
We've been discussing for a couple of weeks the growing tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's really a pretty interesting story, I think, because it's the big one people have feared for many, many years, the full-on Sunni-Shia battle with the heavyweight states involved.
And in the midst of those rising tensions, a very odd and mysterious set of circumstances revolving around Lebanon's Prime Minister. Louisa Lovelock of the Washington Post joins us from Beirut, I believe, to talk about it. Louisa, greetings. How are you? Oh, now she's up. All right, fabulous. So, Louisa, for folks not following this story, tell us about the odd and mysterious series of incidents involving the Lebanese Prime Minister.
Well, Saad Hariri, Lebanon's Sunni Prime Minister, resigned 10 days ago in something as a bolt from the blue from Saudi Arabia, its regional patron. The resignation was not expected, and it's really thrown Lebanon into disarray. 10 days later, it feels like there's something of a collective intake of breath here, where the political establishment is waiting to happen next. And everything that happened in Riyadh has significant implications for the wider region.
So this Hariri was a friend of the Saudis. He appears in Saudi Arabia and suddenly resigns his post from there. Did he give a reason?
Well, he says that the resignation was certainly something that he chose to do himself. He blamed Iran and the hand of Iran in Lebanese politics. And what that was really about was Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a key part of Hariri's unity government. And there are certainly critics of Hariri here who will say that he was just offering cover for Hezbollah to go about its business and control the state. But of course, resigning from Saudi Arabia, which was Hariri's regional patron, really made this look as not a Lebanese problem, but a Saudi power play in the wider region. And it's something that's really got people's backs up here. Hariri's face is on posters across the city saying, "We are all with him." And if anything, it's really united the country against Saudi Arabia rather than divided it as they hoped.
Interesting. And aren't some people claiming that Saudi Arabia forced him to resign and he's being held more or less captive in Saudi Arabia?
They are. He gave an interview a few nights ago where he insisted that he was free, he was free to move, and he would come back to Lebanon in the coming days to hand in his resignation. However, anyone who watched the video would have seen an extremely tired-looking man, a man who at times was quite emotional. You know, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, who has always been a very strong figure, looked somewhat broken. At times his voice actually broke. He almost started to cry, and the interviewer cut the interview to go to a commercial break. So as far as anyone can tell, it was not his decision to do this.
Well, and as you described so dramatically in your piece in the Post, he appeared to be looking off camera with some trepidation at somebody behind a glass or something like that. The part that confuses me is that he's allegedly a Saudi ally. Why would Saudi Arabia force him out? What are they hoping for?
Well, I think that's the big question right now. He is a Saudi ally, but he hasn't necessarily done everything that Saudi Arabia wanted to. He formed a unity government and indeed was the prime minister of unity government with Hezbollah. But Saudi Arabia's primary goal in the region right now is to isolate Iran. And while he was part of a government with Hezbollah, I think the Saudis thought this was something that couldn't continue. And the Crown Prince, who's really mounted quite an aggressive power play in his own country at the same time, seems to have forced Hariri's resignation to isolate Hezbollah, a move that hasn't really worked.
People who say tensions are as bad as they've ever been between Saudi Arabia and Iran, are they overstating it?
I don't think they're overstating it. The tensions are very bad, and it's not isolated to any specific country. Hezbollah and Iran have fighting forces in Syria, particularly they are sort of arrayed with President Assad's forces against the opposition, which is backed by Saudi. But they also have interests in Yemen, they have interests in Iraq. And so this is really a kind of geopolitical power play in which Saudi Arabia and Iran are facing off with other countries like Lebanon, a tiny country, are caught in the middle.
Well, let's review for folks who aren't familiar with it with Louisa Lovelock of the Washington Post. Hezbollah is a political party and an army, correct?
It is. Hezbollah has a political role. As I say, it's part of a unity government, but it has much deeper roots than that. It is a paramilitary force which has fought multiple wars with Israel. It has an extensive social network. It provides electricity. It provides handouts for its supporters in Lebanon. And it's also trained movements across the region who are allied against Saudi Arabia. So it kind of provides this weird role where it does have a governance role, it does have a paramilitary role, but it's also just providing bread and butter for the people who support it.
And is it aligned completely with Iran? I mean, is it a tool of Iran, or is it just their allies, generally speaking?
I mean, it is the creation of Iran. The history is slightly more complicated than that, but it's very difficult to see that Hezbollah's key decisions are taken in Lebanon. In fact, they are almost certainly taken by the Iranians in Tehran.
Louisa Lovelock of the Washington Post. Hey, we really appreciate the insight. This is odd, mysterious, and troubling, and I hope we can stay in touch. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In case you missed that, tensions in the Middle East are as high as they've ever been. That is quite a statement.
Between two heavily armed rivals that see God differently and want to kill each other for that the moment they wake up in the morning.
Both of them armed by the two superpowers on Earth.
Right.
One by Russia, one by the United States, who would almost certainly get involved if the two countries went to war.
And it's one of the major sources of oil. Otherwise, luckily, I would go ahead and just follow the NFL season.
Luckily, the oil thing, it does not play the role that it did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Drill, baby, drill.
Where it would have brought the world to a halt. Luckily, it's not like that anymore.
Right.
You hardly even hear that mentioned as part of the problem, whereas it would have been the number one issue not that long ago, which is the advantage of becoming more independent energy-wise. But I don't know that much about this. All I know is that people that follow this for a living say it's as bad as it's been.
Right. Well, if Lebanon, I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen in Lebanon. If, as so often has happened in the past, the various factions decide, I'm tired of voting, time to start shooting. And then the backers of the various factions are going to get involved. That could be the, when the fire marshal shows up to figure out where the fire was set, it could be in Lebanon. That spreads to the whole region. I don't want to freak people out and worry you. You got your own life to live. You got worries. Your kids is that. Your husband's this. You got an ache that you can't. You don't know. Your doctor doesn't know what it is. Everybody's got enough worries in the world. But geopolitically, this one is worth putting on your news feed.
Oh yeah. No kidding.
Strangeness.
So that's that.
Facebook has become an epidemic that is devastating this country. Quote, it literally changes your relationship with society and each other, he said. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains.
That is a quote from the first CEO of Facebook, which is absolutely amazing. Welcome to the Armstrong and Getty Show. So last night on Fox, Tucker Carlson went big with this story. Sean Parker, first CEO of Facebook, he was the Justin Timberlake character in the Facebook movie, if you saw it, admitting that this was the plan from the beginning. They understood the way the brain would react to likes and that little hit you get.
The shot of dopamine.
And I'm thinking, by the way, the Twitter people picked up on that too, and they all understood this from the beginning. It isn't just I thought all along it's just an unfortunate side effect. Still important, we still got to look at it, but it's just unfortunately the way we're reacting to this communication device.
Right, like Sean Parker ran in and said to Mark Zuckerberg, Mark, this is really crazy. Turns out when people get likes, that they have dopamine go off in their brain. Can you believe it? No, they knew from the beginning. Yeah. That's what they were doing.
That was the whole plan.
Right.
And so Tucker Carlson opened last night. He said in 1994, the heads of the tobacco companies sat in front of Congress and they were being questioned and said, cigarettes are not addictive. When everybody who smoked cigarettes knew they were addictive, and there was plenty of science to say that they are addictive. And they eventually, over the years, have had to pay out hundreds of billions of dollars because they were lying about that.
Right.
And he started quoting some of the studies that we have talked about in recent weeks about the suicide rate, particularly among girls, which is at a 40-year high, and how much of it is
teenage girls, teens, yeah,
and how much of it is tied into social media. There is science to back the idea that this stuff is making us miserable and making people kill themselves and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got Sean Parker from Facebook doing an interview where he says, yeah, from the beginning we knew that this was addictive. That was how we knew it would be so successful. Where do you think that is going?
Do we have more of him, or before we launch into the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, to really understand it. That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, and it's me, it's Mark, it's the Kevin Systrom at Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
So
that's something.
Adults, the vast majority of adults either are capable of helping themselves, or there's nothing you can do for them. You know what I mean? That's part of my libertarian bent. I'm more than willing to, if I discover something if I come to a realization, look, this is going to hurt you in your life and your family, I'll say it out loud. Then if you have enough self-awareness, intelligence, etc., to pick up on that and say, wow, that's a good point, then you can be helped. If you don't, then there's practically nothing I can do to help you, and I don't want to design some giant nanny state to keep you, warm and safe. It doesn't work. But the kids I worry about. And so you've got a situation where at the very moments when a child's sense of identity are being formed, a sense of themselves, their worth, their place in the world, who am I, what do other people think of me, we're building them an artificial, like Parker said, social validation feedback loop. We've built a brand new one that supplants the millions of years old one. This new one happens to be incredibly abusive and amoral and often anonymous, or at least it moves you one step away. One of the most interesting aspects of the book on killing that I just finished reading is that it is much, much more difficult to stab somebody to death than to shoot them. And it's much, much easier to shoot them with a rifle from 150 yards away than it is to shoot them point blank. What we've done is enabled cruelty precisely when it's the most damaging on a massive scale with our kids. And that's why we have young girls are killing themselves at triple the rate of like 10 years ago. It's a freaking nightmare.
And so is
Louis K. can, pardon me, folks, masturbate in front of fellow comedians all day long for the next 150 years.
Wow, that seems unlikely.
And it is it would be a superhuman effort. It would be just a single little drop compared to the Pacific Ocean of significance, I think, of this social media story.
So is this more like the tobacco industry, where they're going to be shelling out gazillions of dollars? There need to be warning labels and programs in school to keep people from using and all that sort of stuff? Or is it more like the food industry, which also knows that they're tricking us and exploiting human behavior to get us addicted to something that is not healthy for us?
Great question.
And we just say, well, what you just said, you're an adult, make your choice. You have this information. If you can't stop it, that's your problem.
Yeah.
So is it cigarettes or is it the food industry? Or is it...
I think it's probably more like the food industry, because, there's no reason to burn tobacco and suck it into your lungs. And by the way, it gives you cancer. There is plenty of reason to interact with people And there's plenty of reason to interact with people online. So I think it's going to be more like the food thing, and I think aware, educated, smart parents are going to keep their kids the hell away from this as much as they can, and parents who don't know, their kids are going to wolf down the marshmallows and McDonald's hamburgers of Facebook or Instagram or whatever.
I don't do Facebook, but I do Twitter, and I have a feeling the Twitter people also knew how this worked.
Oh, yeah.
With the little shot of
to.
dopamine you get every time you notice you've got a text or whatever. But society is, the current society, I'd love to just not do Twitter, because I know it's bad for me. But I don't think the way society's currently constructed, that's an option.
Well, I've
got one friend who refuses to tweet, and it makes it very difficult to deal with him. I don't think I could make my life function without Twitter. So you got to do it some.
Really? In what way? In what sense? Taking in news or putting stuff out? Because if I just take in headlines, then I don't think there's that nearly as much of that social, what does he call it, social validation feedback loop.
You know, I was saying Twitter and thinking texting. I mean texting.
Oh.
Which I'm addicted. I'm addicted to carrying my phone around for texts. And I wish I could just not do that. And it's the ding, I got a text. Oh my God. I got the good feelings in my brain. This is going to be huge. This is something fantastic. Oh no, it's just my wife saying I'll be home at 3.
Yeah.
Damn it. Wait for the next one. Ding! What is this? It must be Joe. Something big has happened with our career. We're fired or we got a new station. No, it's nothing. That's what your brain is doing.
You know, I think the fact that you're aware of it puts you way ahead of the unwashed masses who have no idea that they are the crack monkey in the experiment, hitting the button over and over again until they got their bleeding eyes and their teeth have fallen out and can't even peel a banana.
Is Facebook on the hook for anything since they knew this with what they were doing? What if studies show there might already be these studies that show it's absolutely a connection between the suicides of teenagers and Facebook?
They would make the argument that, look, it's a tool, and if you use it in a healthy way, you'll be healthy. If you allow it to get unhealthy, you'll be unhealthy. It's not our fault. Which is, only partly true, but legally speaking, I think is plenty a good enough argument.
Should they be hammering kids in school from the earliest age like they do with tobacco about Facebook, you think?
I'd rather have parents do it, but, yeah. Well, yeah, I think the evidence is absolutely clear that it damages you and your self-image. I mean, listen, you can be a pretty together adult and unleash something on the internet you think is great, and then you don't get the positive feedback you expected, and you think, oh, wow, oh. And it hurts a little bit. A little bit. If you're a 12-year-old girl, oh, my God. I hope, God dang it, I want to call all my kids and say, conference call time, Dad has something to say. And they're adults at this point.
Looking back, do you think MySpace was a gateway drug?
Michael, turn off your microphone. MySpace.
I have another question about this, but we need to take a break. You know what we're going to do? We're going to give you the dopamine hit commercials.
415-295-KFTC is the text line. What say you? 415-295-KFTC.
People are saying, well, my kids don't use Facebook, they use Snapchat. It's all the same thing.
Yep.
It's the same thing that's going on.
And don't forget, we haven't even mentioned the addictatron element of this, where you get rewards for Snapchatting X number of days in a row. Don't break your string. You've gotten likes on Facebook X number of days in a row. Don't lose your streak.
One of the things Sean Parker said that make him a pretty unlikable human being. We'll have that for you coming up. Also, you're listening to the Armstrong and Getty Show. Here's your trivia question. I'll hit you with the answer in a couple of minutes. How many chocolate donuts from McDonald's? And I'm guessing, I've never had a chocolate donut from McDonald's, but
I didn't know they had them.
I didn't either. But
Is that a morning thing?
I'm guessing they're not the healthiest donut in the world either. How many chocolate donuts from McDonald's would you have to eat to equal a gingerbread frappuccino from Starbucks? There's your trivia question.
Wow.
I'll hit you with the answer in just a moment.
Well, you know what? I want to see. Hang on a second. You know me. I paint amazingly detailed pictures.
I got all the details for you
with my my verbiage.
Fat, sugar, etc.
So yeah, I want to be able to picture them.
Chocolate donuts from McDonald's?
Yeah, do they look like a big old fresh baked one at your local, fresh fried one at your local place, or they
seem to be in the mold of the jelly donut. There's no hole in it, right? So it's got like the
jelly donut.
Well, I'm looking at
the
a sugar donut. Oh my God, my mouth is actually watering.
No. So the quote that caught my attention from Sean Parker, first president of Facebook, who helped to design the whole thing, is Facebook literally changes your relationship with society. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. And the question I would have is, to what extent do they have any either financial or just moral responsibility to the increased suicide rate among teens, which all kinds of studies show come out of this social media thing?
A terrifying, gigantic rise in suicide.
Yeah, when in him saying God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains, that sounds to me like you have some concern about that. Yeah. Now, does this Sean Parker, does he come off as a better person than he did in that interview? Because there's some stuff he says in that interview. It does make him sound like the greatest person, but do you know Sean?
He has a reputation for being somewhat arrogant.
By the way, if you gave me $1 billion when I was 20, oh my God.
Well, he was already...
The quotes you'd have gotten out of me in my 20s and 30s?
Oh, please. If anybody has any quotes from me in my 20s, please quash them.
Not only give you billions of dollars, but have a lot of the world hailing you as a genius.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd have said some pretty awful things.
Well, because he was already a big deal before the Facebook stuff. He was the guy behind Napster.
Yep. But so...
God, that's a blast from the past, Napster.
Yeah, no kidding.
He said
it's piracy.
He said this because, as part of the interview, he said, new advances in life sciences are allowing humans to live much longer and more productive lives, said Sean Parker, formerly of Facebook. Because I'm a billionaire, I'm going to have access to better health care, so I'm going to be like 160, and I'm going to be part of this like class of immortal overlords. You give us billionaires an extra 100 years, and you'll know what wealth disparity looks like.
I think he said of compound interest. Oh, yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, well, how old is he at this point?
37.
Yeah, and he's going to live to be 160. Sure you are, brother.
And he's got, he's spending a gazillion dollars on these various cancer research, bringing together the best scientists and all that sort of stuff.
Beautiful.
So it's super good for him.
Yeah, he's trying to do a little bit more philanthropy in this stage of his life.
That was what I was getting at. I wonder where, because Zuckerberg is a very socially aware person, it would seem.
Claims to be, sure. Acts like one, yeah.
At some point, aren't they going to say, there's a lot of teenage girls killing themselves because of our invention?
Yes.
We got to get the word out or spend a bunch of money on I don't know, rehabs or something. Don't you think that'll happen?
At the very least, warnings and outreach and the rest of it. You know, I hope it does. And listen, Mark, I realize I've referred to you as evil, specifically and by name, on a number of occasions, but nonetheless, I'd like to ask you to listen to me for a moment. How about you start that today, by this afternoon? Start acting on the fact that your platform is probably unwittingly driving many children to kill themselves.
You know why you can't do it?
Well,
it just occurred to me.
And call your buddies at Instagram and the rest of it. How's come?
Because he's, as we speak, introducing it in countries around the world. He can't give that speech in America as he introduces it to some country in Africa. By the way, we already know it's going to cause a quintupling of the suicide rate among your children, but let me get you hooked up for free.
You know, if I were going to play the devil's advocate, and once again, literally advocating for Satan and Mark Zuckerberg, I would say, look at what Facebook and Twitter and these other social media platforms have done for overthrowing dictators, for bringing political awareness to oppressed people,
so you can
bringing awareness in general to oppressed people. Listen, there are some negative consequences. We're working on that.
Overthrowing dictators so you can get different, worse dictators, which is what usually happens.
Well, and so you can sell them a pair of pants that they happen to mention over their phone to somebody the other day. Exactly. Peering into their lives, reading their emails, one of which mentioned golf clubs, and so now they'll have golf clubs on their feed for the next, 3 months in Zimbabwe.
Listen, boys, you're forgetting who else knows that Facebook and social media are addictive. The Russians! Yeah, they're... The Russians!
Duh. Oh, Judy and I finally... Oh, you remember when I used to review 10-year-old movies? Now I'm reviewing 5-year-old TV shows. Judy and I are finally really getting into The Americans. Oh, my God, what a great series. Oh, it's so good. It's so nasty-licious. Russian agents living among us, acting like perfectly normal Americans.
The wig budget on that show is off the charts. The different wigs they put on.
And the fake mustache budget.
It's great.
It's amazing. God, is there somewhere you can get a reasonably priced collection of theatrical mustaches and beards? And I don't want to use spirit gum, all right? But maybe just have a big red beard for a couple of days. Wouldn't that be exciting?
From the text line, Zuckerberg is Beelzebub.
I wonder, there are a number of aspects of his act that are awfully anti-Christy.
Both have Z's in the name.
Right.
They sound similar, don't they?
Beelzebub. I'll keep working on that.
I'm more worried about Facebook for my kids' brains than football. Okay.
Well, yeah, I would start with the girls.
Well, one, my kids probably won't play football. They will be involved in Facebook or something like it.
Right.
It's a bunch of texters saying, you give me that much money when I was his age and I'd be dead already. Yeah, no kidding. A lot of people would.
And listen, in one way, I'd be more worried about social media than drugs, because you can make a specific, detailed, persuasive argument against drug use to your children, one they can understand and remember. To describe to them and convince them that this social validation feedback loop is extremely dangerous, even as they are getting the validation they desperately need from it, trying to get that to stick in their nutty teenage heads. Good luck.
Well, yeah, and you could live your whole life without doing drugs and be fine. You're not going to live your life without doing social media. It's very unlikely.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. It'll be interesting to follow over the next several years. If all of a sudden kids are going to be learning in school the way they do about cigarettes, about how awful Facebook can be. I don't know if that's where we're going.
The social media, the social validation feedback loop as your identity is being formed and the danger of it. I think you could inject some sort of curriculum into schools or churches and parents, et cetera. I think you could do that pretty effectively.
Okay, so I got to pay this off. There is something called a gingerbread frappuccino, which I've never had. A grande gingerbread frappuccino. And I'm here to tell you, the kind of person that gets a gingerbread frappuccino is going to get the venti, which is the bigger one. So this is just the grande.
Which is the small one?
It's the medium one.
Tall is the small
Tall is small.
Ah, right. Reminding myself of why I virtually never walk in.
I don't know why they do that.
To the Zuckerberg-like milkshake shop known as Starbucks. A
grande gingerbread frappuccino has 68.5 grams of sugar.
Fat! 3 full-size Snicker bars, roughly?
So
I don't remember.
Sugar, fat, calories is the equivalent of eating 7 McDonald's chocolate donuts.
I'm looking at the aforementioned donut. It is a full-size donut covered with chocolate with a chocolate center. It's like a jelly donut, as Sean described, but full of chocolate.
You'd have to eat 7 of those to equal 1 grande, which you're not ordering a grande if you are grande, gingerbread frappuccino.
It is not a coffee shop. It's a milkshake shop.
Yeah.
Unless you go in and you buy coffee.
We all fool ourselves with these various changes of names, I guess, right? I realize that one that I fall for easily. Eating banana bread and pretending it's bread and not banana cake. It's just eating cake.
Oh, I love banana bread.
I love banana bread.
Mind your own business.
There's nothing wrong with eating bread.
Mind your own business. It's bananas.
If there's cake, fruit, I'm not going to have a piece of cake. Probably.
But I will eat banana bread.
Yeah.
Well, a little butter. You got to have some butter on there.
And then the reason was my wife made banana bread, which I ate like half of the night before. And then the big thing of sugar was sitting on by the stove. And I said, where's the sugar out? And she said, I used it in the banana bread. And I said, there's sugar in banana bread? She looked at me like she looked at me when I said there's a plug for the boat. And she said, yeah, banana bread is banana cake. We just call it banana bread, but it's really banana cake. It's the same as making a cake.
But it's shaped like bread, except for pound cakes, which are shaped exactly like banana bread.
There's no frosting.
So you get a Frappuccino and you say you got a coffee drink when you got a milkshake. It's easier to go down brain-wise.
Oh, my. To thine own self be true. Best advice ever given. Shakespeare said that. You know Shakespeare? You ever read any Shakespeare? Huh? Smart man.
What's coming up in your news, Marshall?
Well, we're going to hear from the reporter who broke the Senate candidate Roy Moore.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said today that he believes the women who have accused Senate candidate Roy Moore of inappropriate sexual contact, adding that Moore should step aside. I'm proud of you, Mitch. That took a lot of chins.
Oh, that is just plain a shot at a person's physical appearance.
He's an older man, too. That's very insensitive.
I'm unhappy to hear this. Maybe that makes me a bad American. I suppose I should be America first. You know, dirty commies, China. I kind of wanted to see our basketball players spend a little time in jail for stealing in China. Realize you can't do just whatever the hell you want because you're a gifted athlete and you've done whatever the hell you want your whole life, I'm guessing in junior high, high school, and college, and gotten away with it because you're really good at playing basketball. You're in another country, you stole, you get thrown in jail for a while. I thought that'd be awesome, but Trump worked out some sort of deal, or the U.S. government or whatever, and they're being sent home.
Yeah, the UCLA guys, I'm hoping they got good and scared, but they were confined to the Hyatt or something, right? They weren't in jail. They just made them stay in the hotel.
You know what lesson they learned as I'm raising a couple of little kids and realizing what lessons they learned from these things? They learned the lesson that, you know what, I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want. That's the lesson they learned.
That's an interesting point. A friend who will remain nameless points out, so the racist Trump gets Asian friends to free African Americans. Racist. Okay.
But
anyway.
Speaking of China,
we mentioned this briefly before we went to the, yes, sir, China. That thousands of villagers in southeastern China have been told by local officials, take down your Jesus picture. Because Jesus isn't going to make you healthy. He's not going to cure your poverty. He's not going to cure your illnesses. You know who is? Old President Xi. So throw up some say Z. I want to be cultured. So somebody tell me, is it Z or Xi? But anyway.
I believe Ian Bremer says Xi, and he would know.
So I'll go with Xi. So they took down a bunch of Jesus pictures and put up a Xi, which harkens back to the cult of personality surrounding old Mao Zedong, whose picture was in every room. Again, some spell it or pronounce it Zedong. I pronounce it Zedong, like they have it written in the Washington Post. But they go on at length to describe the relationship between religion and politics in China. And I swear, if I hit the lottery or something, I'm going to spend the rest of my life studying China because I find it so interesting that they have a functioning communist / capitalist / socialist system. And the way it works and the way it doesn't work is just endlessly interesting to me. But so they had party members touring villages, telling people how the party was supporting agriculture, removing poverty, et cetera, and that she should no longer rely on Jesus, but the party for help.
You want to know how many Christians there are in China?
Go ahead.
Well, in 2014, they predicted that within 15 years, so by 2030 roughly, China will be the biggest Christian country in the world.
That's amazing.
It's just a population thing. They currently have around 60 million Protestants. 60 million. That's a big number.
Wow. Yeah. Not in China, but yes. They think about
they got a lot of Christians.
They're talking about this big campaign in a big chunk of the country.
I got to jump in one more time.
Sure, go ahead.
100 million Catholics.
Wow.
Depending on who you ask. So there you go. A lot of Christians.
Yeah. So it's about a third of the population in this one big chunk of the country. What was that statistic we heard? There are 1,000 cities with 1 million people or more in China.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, because 1,000 million's a billion, and they got a hell of a lot more than a billion.
And if you had 300 million people living in the rural areas, then you got as many people as the United States live in the rural areas.
Again, I must ask you, if you're going to start the word country, finish it. Okay.
The population of China and India both, it's just staggering. If those economies ever get up and running and modernized, it'll just dominate the market for everything. Yeah. You know what kind of food we'll all be eating? Whatever kind of food the Chinese like. Because it'll just dominate everything.
Well, I'm going with my fabulous new diet, which is making me thin and healthy. And I'm going to lord it over people. I'm going to be superior.
What are you doing that thing? You never eat anything bigger than your fist?
That's right.
Or the paleo diet, eat like a caveman?
I have enormous fists. And an insatiable appetite for raw meat.
What's the name of your diet?
Everybody
wants to know.
No, forget it. It's none of your business.
Anybody listening right now who wants to lose weight is thinking, what's Joe doing?
Go to metafastcalifornia.com. There you go. I could talk about it, but it's boring. Nobody wants to talk about other people's eating.
Are you taking in fewer calories than you used to?
Well, yeah.
There you go. There's a key right there.
Yeah. So, getting back to the dirty commies. Many rural people are ignorant. They think God is their savior, according to the head commie who's in charge of messaging. After our cadres work, they'll realize their mistake and think we should no longer rely on Jesus, but on the party for help. Wow. And so
China is officially, like communist countries are, officially an atheist country.
Yes, their constitution protects the right to religion. But quoting from the Post, the state also takes a dim view of any institution that might challenge its total control over society. So Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and others have the right to worship, but their houses of worship are often tightly controlled and can easily be shut down if deemed distracting or a threat to official dogma.
And if you have a leader who's sticking his head up, Herod might send some people there, and next thing you know, you're gone.
Herod? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Nice biblical reference. Anyway, so that is how religion works in China, more or less. And you've got the party trying to seek more control. They're beginning to refer to Xi as the great leader, which is a term that hasn't been used since Mao. And this matters, evidently, in China. It's a big deal. In America, every 4 years, we announce that it's the most important election of our lifetimes. Right. So, none of our crap matters. But calling him the great leader evidently is symbolically really, really important. But this is one of the things that's always amused me about communist societies since I was a kid studying this in college. Xi's slogans are ubiquitous in China. He'll come up with a little gem, and all of a sudden, it's everywhere. Like here at a basketball game. With there's a barrier between the court and the seats. You know how in America it would say Samsung or, whatever. Thor Beyond Thunderdome opening next week, that sort of thing. Well, in China, for instance, here's a pro basketball game. And it's Xi's slogan, which is really good stuff. Stay true to the mission and keep it firmly in mind. You know what? We have a meeting after the show every day to talk about who's to blame. Mostly.
Is it me again?
Yeah, we gather at the end of the show and we all say, all right, who's to blame for today?
And then we all point fingers. 1, 2, 3. And if anybody's getting the most fingers pointed at them, we all yell at them.
And they have to wear the goat's head and we all beat them with sticks.
That's right. It's a tradition. It's a cherished tradition. But I'm going to start showing the meeting and say, stay true to the mission. And keep it firmly in mind. It must sound better in Chinese. All right, that's enough of that. I've got to get me a list of... I've read my little brother, brother, the Navy guy, when he went to China. Go ahead, Michael. You can play the music. When he went to China, he brought me a copy of Mao's Little Red Book, and I flipped through it, and some of it, well, it's odd. It's just kind of... A lot of it's just kind of lame.
The communist experiment is 100 years old this month.
How's it going, in your opinion?
As it got started in the Soviet Union 100 years ago this month, and it is responsible for tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of deaths.
Sure, communism makes Nazism look like a punk when it comes to killing people, but nobody wants to talk about that. Why? Because of our liberal media that is secretly in league with the communists.
Is Joe Biden running for president? He was on Colbert last night. The subject came up. he's the only name being thrown out there that anybody seems to get excited about on the side of the D's right now.
Well, and I think Joe Biden said the best thing about that I've heard yet, and we'll get to that.
Stay tuned to the Armstrong and Getty Show. Before we get to Joe Biden on Stephen Colbert,
just a couple more sayings of Chairman Xi, who's a really wise man. How do you like this one? Happiness does not fall out of the blue, and dreams will not come true by themselves. We need to be down to earth and work hard. We should uphold the idea that working hard is the most honorable, noblest, greatest, and most beautiful virtue. There's a professor who got into serious trouble the other day by telling his students, you have to work hard and stop drinking so much if you want to do well in my class. And he got disciplined for that.
Because the drinking part of working hard, which some people see as like...
That's racist.
Something, yeah.
Demanding hard work is racist. How about this from Xi Jinping? Some foreigners with full bellies and nothing better to do engage in finger-pointing at us. First, China does not export revolution. Second, it does not export famine and poverty. And third, it does not mess around with you. So what else is there to say?
You know, that whole working hard is the greatest virtue is perfectly okay if it weren't for the fact that all of the elite in these communist countries don't really work at all.
No, they skim off the people.
And get to drive around in Bentleys.
Yeah.
So there's that. So, Sean, Biden was on Colbert last night, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
Okay, let's hear a little of that.
Speaking to a large crowd of Republican audience out in Thousand Oaks, California, and asked the same question. I said, how many of you are now worried about the stability of the republic? How many of you are now worried about this new phony nationalism and it's us against them? How many are worried about this populism that is designed to essentially undermine the essence of the Bill of Rights, which is there's certain inalienable rights that nobody, no matter what the majority is, they cannot overrule? I mean, I just think there's an attack on the system. I think people are worried.
Yeah, from the left, in my opinion.
Biden would
the only people who've ever tried to silence me in my life or told people their point of view can't be aired is from the left, Uncle Joe. What do you say to that, brah?
But Biden would get all of Hillary's voters, guaranteed, and some Trump voters, some of your working-class union-type Trump voters.
I would agree.
And
he's their people.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing he's got working against him is
Father Time.
Father Time. And he was elected to the U.S. Senate when he was 29. We're in this real outsider mode. Bernie, even though he'd been a senator for a while, was a complete outsider. He wasn't even really a Democrat.
They won't let me inside is why.
Trump's the all-time outsider. I mean, all the enthusiasm is for the outsiders and something new. It'd be pretty odd if you get somebody who's been in the Senate since he was 29 years old in the 70s,
right.
To be the guy. But just on paper, he seems like he's got a good shot.
Well, and let's not forget, we've run Uncle Joe up the flagpole a couple of times.
Yeah.
And he's done very, very poorly. Now, he has more gravitas now as a two-term vice president, a job that famously was described as not being worth a bucket of warm poo, which is a hell of a thing. What is a bucket of warm poo worth? Is it more because it's warm? I don't know. But so, and plus, you know, his Veep candidate would be Father Time. You know, the long beard, the scythe, the whole thing.
He turns 75 next week?
I think that's right.
Turns 75 this coming week, which is just amazing.
He'd be 78, I believe, when he'd be running for his first term.
He is really fit, though. I mean, he's a very fit 75-year-old.
Yeah.
But whatever, you know, talking about 2020 is probably stupid.
It's certainly repugnant. But no, that's right. That's so the one thing that Joe Biden said that I thought made absolutely great sense. He told a semi-charming story that I didn't follow at first. He said his dad used to tell him, Joey, don't compare me to the Almighty. Compare me to the alternative.
Oh, yeah, that's a great line.
Well, right. And then Joe said, listen, I don't think I'm so great, except when you compare me to the alternatives.
Right.
And at this point, what you got the ancient. Is it Larry Sanders or what's his name? I can't remember which one's actually the politician. Larry David. I'm sorry. I didn't even get that name right. So you got the ancient Bernie Sanders. $27. The almost as ancient Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. You got a bunch of nonentities and Al Franken.
Yeah, some Hispanic dude you've never heard of is going to come out and be the nominee. That I don't even know who it is right now. He's charming. He's glib. He speaks Spanish and English perfectly.
Right. Handsome.
Yeah, that's who it's going to be.
No big black mustache, though. That's too Hispanic. America's ready. America's ready for a Hispanic president, just not a super Hispanic president.
Wow.
I'm an analyst. I'm analyzing.
I think you're right.
Okay.
I just wouldn't say it out loud.
Well.
The big black mustache.
Just saying.
So for the first time in my life the other day, first time ever in my life, a doctor told me I need to start exercising. It's the first time a doctor has ever said that to me.
Wow, interesting.
And
my doctor greets me with, hey, fat ass. How you doing? Hey, glad to see you fit through the door again, Joe, he says to me.
I say that to our dog all the time, and the running joke in my house is if my wife is in the room, she says, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. I say stuff like, hey, you little fatso. I'm not going to let you talk to me that way.
God, your wife is hilarious. Does she want to do a semi-regular feature on the show?
Are you kidding? She said just yesterday it's her dream to have a radio show.
Really?
Yeah.
God, because she's hilarious, according to your retellings.
She is.
Of course, you're just skimming the cream off the top.
She is dang funny.
Yeah.
But, what was it? Oh, yeah, so the doctor, first time in my life, told me I need to get some exercise, and it sounds good in theory. But I just, with two young children, and I know I'll get the emails, I get the text, or maybe you'll say it to my face about how, I could fit in an hour workout if I cared or whatever. But
it's all about prioritizing, Jack.
I just can't imagine how that's actually going to happen with my current lifestyle. The picking kids up from school and taking them here and there, and these, the sports and this and that, and just the meals and then the dishes and then the working a job. There's that.
It might surprise you, but we actually do work at this.
So yeah, it's just good for you if you're doing. I drive to work every single day. And I see the people that are up with the headlamp on top of their head,
right,
jogging down the path in the pitch dark. Good for you. I admire that. I wish I was like that. I think it's good for me that I recognize I'm not. I've tried the exercising early in the morning thing a number of times in my life. Never happened. In fact, my doctor even said to me, he said, I'm not the kind of guy that's ever going to be able to get up early and do it, so I got to do it at night, which is tough because you're tired. But blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I admire those of you who get up and get up. You actually get out of bed when you set your alarm an hour early instead of thinking, not today. I'm going to sleep this hour. Tomorrow I'll do it.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah, it is. It's just, and I think you're genetically that way. Maybe that's a cop out. I don't know. I just think you either can do that or you can't.
I don't know. Maybe it is a cop out. I certainly wouldn't be able to tell you if I. Granted, we already get up with the dairy farmers, but I see people who get up at the same time so they can get their full workout in, shower up, and grab a little granola, and then head on into the office at more or less the usual time. But I swear to God, if somebody said, listen, you get up an hour early, put in 45 minutes of workout, grab a shower, I'll give you $100 every time, and you get laid every time.
Wow, that's an offer.
I would do it once. I would do it once. And never again. I'm just telling you.
Well, that's a good thing to know about yourself, because you can't hardly get a more motivating prize than that. And you think you'd do it once.
Well,
I wouldn't do it every time. I might do it a couple of times, but almost guaranteed that third time I'd think, I'm sleeping today.
I have repeatedly, sometime for years at a time, tried to get by on less than 8 hours sleep. And it makes me psychotic. I'm an 8-hour guy. And, I used to be like ashamed of that because Oh, no, you're real go-getters. They can get by at 6. You could if you wanted to. You're just lazy. F y'all. F y'all. I'm with, you know who I'm with? Science. Medical science. I need that much sleep, so I get that much sleep. Yeah. And that explains my charming and vivacious personality.
Yeah, I live on 6. That's not good for me, I'm sure.
What do you reckon would be ideal for you?
9? I don't know.
I might be an 8.5 hour guy.
I don't know.
There's a limit.
But, and then the exercise, the other option really for most people, I think, is you exercise at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And
that's when you're already tired. I know people, they eat right. They make exercise the highest priority. It's just good for you. That is awesome that you can do that. at this point in my life, at some point, you've got to recognize that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to recognize if I don't figure out a way to exercise, it's going to kill me early.
Yeah. How about your mini exercise? You walk because your mailbox out on the main road because your house is way up a private drive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack has a 5,000 acre. His house is 25,000 square feet, but no, you're on a ranch. So walk as fast as you can to the post office and back every day, fast as you can.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You do that? That's a pretty good improvement.
Sure, all that stuff's better than nothing.
Look for dumb stuff, little stuff.
Which is something I have said my whole life. Yeah, it's better to do some than none.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't get discouraged into being, I won't do any because it makes me think of it guy or gal. Because I know how that is. It's often if you leave your conscience on even a little bit, it bugs the hell out of you. So you try to turn it off completely. Try not to do that. I say that as a guy whose inclination, I'm a man who craves leisure.
If I had a gym membership and go an hour every day, if you commit to that, good if you can do it. But I think if you commit to that, then you're getting into that whole, one extreme to the other thing. That's a heck of a lifestyle change.